What will be the effect of another round of trillions of dollars of free money that the Democrats and Republicans plan to give to the American people in the run-up to the presidential election? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's segment of the Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is this week's issue of the Libertarian Angle. The show, as our longtime supporters know, brings you the principled, uncompromising case for liberty and the libertarian philosophy. And I'm joined, as I am every week, by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, who teaches economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
Good to see you too, and our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Come and visit us at fff.org and subscribe to this channel on YouTube. Okay, Richard, so we're hearing talk of another great big stimulus package. Apparently the couple million or whatever it was, trillion, sorry. That didn't quite do the trick. And so the feds, both in Congress and the executive branch, are talking about spending another $2-3 trillion. Another little stimulus package. You can see the support that they're getting in the mainstream press. There's economists, and I put that in quotation mark, economists saying, oh, spending is great, don't be worried, you know, happy days are here. Oh yeah, there's $26 trillion in debt that the federal government's in, but hey, we owe it to ourselves. And so what if it goes up to 30 trillion? Same thing is happening over in Europe. Another great big, or maybe it's their first big stimulus package, I'm not sure. But this is just, I mean, it's amazing, Richard, that this kind of economic nonsense is still going on. I mean, you can tell what's happening to the dollar, the value of the dollar, it's cratering. The commodities markets are going crazy in an upward trajectory. I mean, this is just standard old school economics 101, that when you spend money, when you're out there printing money, which is what the Federal Reserve's doing and the U.S. government's doing. I mean, sure, they do it in a more fancy way than just printing the money, but that's effectively what they're doing. The value of it is going to go down. I mean, it's this notion that government has something free to give us. And people don't ask, or at least some people don't ask, well, where is the government getting this money? I mean, let's say they pass another $3 trillion stimulus package, send everybody their checks. Where are they getting this money? I mean, do they have it hidden under their bed in the White House? Do they have it over at Fort Knox? I mean, we all know the government's broke. I mean, you know, even before this coronavirus crisis, the government was spending $1 trillion more than what it was bringing in taxes. So where does it get this extra $3 trillion? Well, I mean, there's only one place, and that's from the taxpayers. They either tax them directly by seizing their money through the IRS, or they just borrow the money, which means the same thing. They're going to suck all this money out of the private sector in terms of borrowing, and they add on to the debt that everybody's responsible for, and they say, here's your money. Free money. It's sort of like if I come and offer you, you know, let's say $1,000 a month, and you say, is it free? Oh yeah, Richard, it's free. And so at the end of the year, you say, well, thank you so much, but why is this $12,000 on my credit card? And I said, well, hey, how else was I going to get the money to give you $1,000 a month free except by charging your credit card? And that's really what they're doing. When they're borrowing all this money, or they're printing the money, they're taxing people indirectly through inflation. I mean, this is just standard stuff that governments have done for eons, and it's not going to end nicely, Richard. It never has ended nicely. We can see what happens with countries that try to spend themselves rich. They go broke and they break people in the process. What do you think?
Well, the thing is that we're sort of in this because it's almost a logical extension of the earlier free money philosophies that came out of John Maynard Keynes, the famous British economist, the father of what has been known as Keynesian economics. his famous book of 1936, the General Theory of Money, Interest, and Employment. And the thrust of his argument is that private sector economies have this tendency to be inherently unstable and to unpredictably fall into recessions with less than full employment output, rising unemployment of vast segments of the economy, and that because the private sector isn't spending enough, it's the duty, the responsibility of a government to come in and to make up the difference. That is, to spend enough to bring resources back into full utilization and all those out of a job to full employment through running a budget deficit. And that's either borrowed money, which the Keynesians presume people have put into banks as savings, but private business investors are too hesitant or reluctant or nervous to borrow, so it's sitting there idle in the banks. So borrow the unborrowed money, and the government will fill, or the government just goes to the central bank and has them print the money. Now, that's been the philosophy guiding much of governments around the world for nearly a century now. The presumption here is that if government is to do its job of making demand increase enough through its own deficit spending, either through borrowing supposedly unborrowed private savings or through printed money, but there can't be any restraint or limit. That's why the Keynesians so vehemently opposed the old gold standard. Because when gold was money, paper money was merely a claim to that gold, like an IOU. I've deposited $100 of gold coin in the bank. The bank notes were basically claims to that money, an IOU, well, like the chit you get at the coat room at a theater where you leave your coat and they give you the chit, and then you turn in the chit and they give you back your coat. The chit isn't the coat, it's a claim coat. And that's what the banknotes are supposed to be claims to gold. But that means that governments or central banks couldn't just print more notes because they're only supposed to issue as many notes as gold has been deposited with them by their depositors, their customers. So that was the constraint. So we have to break that constraint to have an unlimited ability to print any amount of money with the printing press. Now, of course, today it's not the literal printing press, though of course we do have paper money in the actual sense. It's basically all computer money because we deal with our credit cards and our internet transactions and so on. But it's nonetheless, quote, printing money. So what we've now seen in the last several years is a school of thought, which is in a sense a logical outgrowth of the Keynesians, called modern monetary theory, MMT, modern monetary theory. And their presumption is the following, Jacob, that as long as a government has control of its own currency, that is, currency autonomy, then it can print as much of that money as it wants with no threat. Now, for example, if another country is using US dollars, well, it can't print up US dollars. It has to import dollars. But if the US government has its own printing press through the Federal Reserve, the central bank, then there is no restraint other than what the government considers is necessary and desirous in terms of assuring full employment and full capacity utilization of other resources in any way imaginable that serves the common good. This is seen in these proposals that have come out for hundreds of billions of dollars of promised and proposed expenditure from the Joe Biden camp. $400 billion for this. The money can just be borrowed, or some of it will be by taxing, the undeserving rich. But the theory behind this is basically saying is that you owe it to yourself. The Federal Reserve, our central bank, can just print up that money to cover all of the non-tax government, U.S. government spending, and there's no cost to this. Now, when should it stop? Well, when crudely prices in general are rising all across the board. Then we've reached full employment. And then if you want to stop inflation, you don't stop printing money or reverse the process and withdraw money from circulation. No, you raise prices. You siphon off the excess dollars that you've created that are making prices in general rise by taxing it away from people. And therefore, the purpose of taxes is to control inflation, not to fund government for what we as classical liberals would be considered essential, though minimal functions, or as others might want to spend it more on certain things. No, the purpose of taxation isn't to generate funds to cover government expenses. Taxation becomes a fiscal tool for government to control inflation. The printing press is just to see that government has as much money as it needs and wants to do all the things. Well, this is a recipe for disaster, because every politician, every special interest group, every bureaucracy wanting to feed its annual budgets and see them expanded are going to always rationalize, we need more of this, we need more of that. My sector of the economy is essential to the U.S. government. And besides the fact that I gave you, the candidate or the office holder, a whole bunch of campaign contribution money in the national interest, you should keep funding the things that support my sector of the economy. Now, this is setting us up, not just for the danger at some point of radically high and destabilizing price inflation, but unlimited government spending. Because you're basically saying, if you can get politicians to form a coalition in Congress to agree with what money should be spent and how much, and if you get the president to sign it, then you just spend anything you want. There's no limit. And you don't have to worry about taxes. Just borrow, borrow, borrow. And to be honest, it goes back to one of Franklin Roosevelt's senior campaign managers of the 1930s. What do you do in an election? Spend, 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 elect, elect, elect. And this is that philosophy on steroids. It's basically meaning a total uncontrolled government management and therefore mismanagement of the money supply to feed its spending purposes with no limits, no constraints, and no backstop other than the destruction of the economy and the society at some point in the future.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. In a political sense, it's really just a sophisticated way to buy votes. And the Democrats are competing against the Republicans as to who's going to get credit for buying these votes with this free money. That who are the voters going to reward and thank? On these stimulus checks, Trump, as I understand it, sent out letters saying, "Oh, I'm sending you this free money. Keep me in mind." And of course, the message is that in election time, I'm the one that brought you this money, and it's cost free. It doesn't cost you anything. That's the message. Well, it's very, very costly. And when we look at countries like Greece or other nations where the debt has gotten so large, we see the government gets to a point where it just lacks the tax revenues to even pay the interest on the debt. Together with all of its welfare program and its warfare programs, it gets to a point where its revenues cannot handle the expenditures. And so there's where you've got your bankruptcy. That's why Greece started to go under. Now, of course, there were nations that came out and bailed out Greece, but nobody's going to bail out the United States. And we have all the makings for that type of crisis. I mean, you've got, a large number of people who are unemployed. So that causes tax revenues to go down. If people aren't working, they're not paying taxes. And so you've got the tax revenues decreasing. The military, the CIA, the NSA, the National Security Establishment, they're not cutting their expenditures. And then the domestic expenditures, the entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, none of those people are going to permit any cut in their expenditures. And then the whole rest of the welfare state. This is not a pretty scene, and it's good that you brought up the founding system of the United States, because that's the real shame of this thing. The United States, the American people, when they called the federal government into existence, called into existence at the same time, along with this government, the greatest monetary system in history. It was phenomenal. It was called the gold standard. It was really a gold coin, silver coin standard. Gold coins and silver coins were the official legal tender of the realm, and they had government coining the money. Now, of course, government can defraud people by, issuing money that is certified to say 1 ounce of gold when it really contains, less than an ounce. But in fact, that the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. Mint issued for more than 100 years some of the soundest coinage ever. And of course, the Constitution called for coining money, not printing money. You can't coin a paper. It said the federal government will have the power to coin money. And then there was even a restriction on the states that no state shall make anything but gold and silver legal tender. So it was clear that this was the official money, gold coins and silver coins. And as you pointed out, there were debt instruments, but everybody understood that those debt instruments were promises to pay gold coins and silver coins. Everybody knew that the coins were the money and the notes were the promises to pay money. This goes on for over 100 years. And then the Federal Reserve gets established in 1913, along with the federal income tax. And then the Federal Reserve goes into action during the 20s, throws everything out of kilter, and that's what brought the stock market down in 29. That was the stock market crash. Now, they blamed it on the failure of free enterprise, but as the Austrian school has pointed out, as Milton Friedman has pointed out, this was the failure of the Federal Reserve, which is no part of a free market system. It's a centrally planned socialist system. And then Roosevelt goes and completes the dirty deed, nationalizes gold. I mean, it's just incredible. Just like what the communists were doing in the Soviet Union. He nationalized what had been the official money. No constitutional amendment changed the system. He just said, I'm nationalizing it. Everybody's ordered to turn their gold in. And we're now going to have a total paper currency system where the paper still says Federal Reserve note, but it promises to pay nothing. It's irredeemable. Except, you go in there and say, oh, I want to be paid off. It's a note. Well, yeah, here's another note in exchange. And that's what caused the decade after decade of really a financial holocaust where they just kept printing money to finance both the welfare state, the warfare state. They drove silver out of circulation, following Gresham's law that bad money drives out good money. And now we're where we are today, where you've got massive expenditures of the welfare state and the warfare state, and you've got this massive crisis, really a perfect storm of a crisis, with a monetary crisis, an economic crisis, and then the health crisis with the coronavirus. This thing is all coming together in a perfect storm, and they are just now printing the money like there was no tomorrow. And like I said earlier, this is not going to end in a good way.
To show you the mindset of the times, both among political pundits and policy analysts and in many of the professional circles of economics, there was either yesterday or today an opinion piece in the New York Times saying, heaven help us. I believe the title of the article is Heaven Help Us, from Judy Shelton. Now, Judy Shelton is a monetary economist that Donald Trump has nominated to be appointed to the board of the Federal Reserve. And the appropriate Senate committee has recommended her name now to the full floor of the Senate. Now, Judy Shelton has a variety of views about what a gold standard is and how it should be managed. But that, in this case, is less relevant than the fact that she does believe in a gold standard. She's even, in one or two places, asked the question, do we even have a Federal Reserve? So what is the response to the idea of someone who just believes in any version of the gold standard being nominated and possibly appointed to the Federal Reserve? A panic among a huge number of economists and the pundits. Well, this is anachronistic. This is like caveman economics. The idea that the Federal Reserve should not have absolute arbitrary discretion to manipulate interest rates, to print money, to monetize debt, to be able to just buy up any asset to create the necessary money so government can spend. Oh my God, someone who believes that gold should some way be related to the monetary system, banish, throw her out, burn her at the stake. Oh, We knew that Trump was a jerk and an evil person. I mean, again, my point is not to make a case for or against Judy Shelton and her particular views on what she thinks is a desirable version of the gold standard. But it's the idea of the reaction to anybody who wants any kind of gold standard. You know, the anger, the shock, and the disdain for anyone who believes that a central bank should have some external check on what it can do with its policy tools. That shows how low we have fallen in terms of our understanding of how an economic system could or should work.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, how can it be any surprise? I mean, this is what they teach in the colleges and universities across America, the standard Keynesian model. I mean, I learned it in college. I was an economics major, and I had Samuelson's textbook for Economics 101, and then I had the standard Keynesian model building. I didn't know anything about Austrian economics. I was never exposed to that. But boy, when I learned about Austrian economics, that's when I realized the Austrians were right. And to a certain extent, so is Friedman. I mean, Friedman made the point, Milton Friedman. I remember that he had a great op-ed where he said, my modest proposal for the Fed, and then he sets forth this limit on the Fed printing money, you know, like a 2 or 3% inflation rate, something like that, maybe 1%. But he did put in parentheses, my preferred solution for the Fed is to abolish it. And so he was showing what the ideal was and what is a practical thing we should do if you're not going to abolish it. And I think it's only right that we bring up Hayek's solution, because as good as the gold standard was, and it really was a good system. I mean, these coins, you can go to the internet and Google, you know, silver dollar and gold $20 St. Gaudens piece. These were beautiful coins. I mean, you still buy them today. They're numismatic. But the mint is still printing silver dollars. You can get American Eagles now, except there's an extreme scarcity of them because silver is skyrocketing in price now in response to all this monetary debauchery. But what Hayek proposed, as good as the gold standard was in terms of keeping government constrained, because as you point out, government can't print gold. I mean, it can only print money. And so they were constrained with gold coins being and silver coins being the official money. They were constrained. And that's the way the framers wanted it. They had experience with printed money, paper currency, with the Continental during the Revolution, the American Revolution. The Continental Congress had printed so much paper currency called the Continental that this famous saying came into existence, oh, that ain't worth a Continental, because the Continental was worthless because they had printed so much of it, which is essentially what they're doing now with the dollar. But Hayek, when I read about Hayek's essay, and I read his essay, The Denationalization of Money, I realized, I said, this guy has it right, that get government totally out of the monetary business. I mean, my second choice obviously would be a gold coin, silver coin standard. But my ideal choice is what Hayek said, is separate money and the state. I mean, the free market produces the best of everything. And that's what it would do in the monetary field. That if you left money to the free market, the market would determine whether gold is the money or the silver coins, all privately issued, or bitcoins or American Express banknotes, and there'd be probably a mixture of everything, but some commodity or some item would predominate. But that's the market. I mean, that's just, you know, real people operating in a setting where they're trading goods and services, and something rises to the surface that facilitates that trade, and that becomes the money. And that really is the ideal solution, Richard, is just separate money in the state and let the free market determine the monetary arena.
Yes, in fact, you may recall that someone who's connected with FFF did a book under the Future Foundation's auspices called, what was that? Monetary Central Planning under State. The author's name eludes me now.
Yeah. But, take out your modesty cap.
But basically, you'll recall that the first part of the book is an explanation of the Austrian theory in the business cycle, contrasting it with Keynesianism and a bit with monetarism. but that the second part of the book is precisely on the issue you're raising, central banking versus private competitive free banking. And that really the optimal system consistent with actually economic stability and flexibility, as well as personal and market freedom, is a competitive free banking system where it has nothing to do with money or the financial markets. All that banks and other financial institutions would be obligated to do is to meet the legal requirements of any business, act honestly, and abide by your contractual obligations.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think you're raising the issue of fractional reserve banking. I mean, you could have a system, as Hayek said, where the free market's determining this, and then the banks determine their own reserve requirements. And if there's some libertarians that have said, well, this is fraud, and there should be 100% reserves before the bank can issue credit notes or demand deposits. But my position is that fraud is when you're misrepresenting something. If a bank is up there being upfront and saying, hey, look, this is a high-risk venture. We're issuing a lot of notes here. You put your money here. We'll pay you a lot of interest, a higher interest rate, but you take your chances. Versus a bank next door that says, no, we're playing it safe. We're just have a 95% reserve requirement. You put your money here and it's virtually solid. I mean, the most solid thing would just be a warehouse that says, we'll keep your money here in safe deposit box and we won't lend it out at all, and you pay us a fee. Well, in that case, everybody takes their chances. You want to risk some money and go into a bank that's engaging in high rates of fractional reserve banking? Fine. Everything is on the up and up. If the bank goes under, there's a bank run or whatever, you lose your money, just like you do in the stock market when you invest in a speculative stock. But that's the way the free market would work. The government wouldn't be there to bail you out if your bank goes under. You have to do your due diligence. You have to go out and do your research. But in the process, the market, independent of what each bank is doing, is determining what is the ideal medium of exchange, and the market's making that determination.
Yeah, in fact, there was a German free market economist named Gustav Stolper in the interwar period. He came to America to escape the Nazi regime during the war. And he wrote a book during the war years here in the United States, in which he says at one point that advocates of free market capitalism do not realize how their ideas and the system lost its innocence once it was presumed that governments should have central banking control of the monetary system. Because as he says, nothing other than confiscation itself is as dangerous and threatening to a free economy as government management of the monetary system.
That's a great point. And we haven't even talked about the intricacies of the price system. I mean, the price system, people calculate with prices. That's how they determine, should they invest in this particular business? Should they go out and borrow this money to expand their business? Should they purchase this type of item? Should they go into debt to do so? And prices make that determination. People can calculate. But when government's over there screwing up the whole intricate information conveyance system called the price system, how do people calculate? I mean, that's why you have these bubbles, that the government's making it look like, oh, prosperity is here, the stock market's soaring, and go out there and start expanding your businesses and so forth. And then people realize, hey, the wealth is not there for this. They can't sustain this kind of expansion of the business. The bubble bursts, and that's where you get the recession and the depression. That's all blamed again on free enterprise, when it's really, this is what the government has done to our money, along with these bubbles bursting and so forth. All right, on that note, why don't we wrap it up? And enjoyed the conversation with you as always. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks for your great support. By the way, you'll be receiving a mid-year fundraising letter from me. I hope you'll give it your due consideration. That's of course how we put out our work. Advancing Liberty is through the support y'all give us, and we'd be very, very grateful if you help us get us through the rest of the year. And again, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so. Come and visit us at fff.org. Subscribe to the FFF Daily if you're not a subscriber, and subscribe to our monthly journal. And of course, hope you'll give us your financial support. Richard, as always, I greatly appreciated your participation and enjoyed the conversation.
It's great to be with you and our viewers and listeners. And I'll just add, if I may, to your comments just now. I have had the great opportunity, honor, and privilege working with the Future Freedom Foundation since its inception, 30 years now. And I can honestly say that any contribution that you might find it possible in your heart to make would be well invested and well spent in the cause of a principled and uncompromising case for human liberty in all of its facets, civil, political, and economic, as well as in matters of foreign policy. If you're interested in a voice, a principled voice for free men and a free society, then a contribution to the Future Freedom Foundation would be well placed.
Yeah, well, thanks, Richard. I mean, yeah, we go back all the way to the beginning where we were struggling in those first years of FFF, and you were the vice president of academic affairs. You were over at Hillsdale College as the Ludwig von Mises professor. And I want to just say that the book you did, I mean, you and I have co-edited a lot of books, and they're available for sale at Amazon and on our website at fff.org. But your book, Monetary Central Planning in the State, anybody that reads that book will know more about monetary issues than I think 98% of the economics professors across the country. So I highly recommend you buy the book and read it too. All right, Richard, on that note, enjoy the conversation. I'll see you next week.